My neighbor said one sentence and my whole life shifted. I never thought something as ordinary as taking out the trash could lead to the most emotionally complicated moment of my life. But here I am months later, still remembering every detail of that afternoon, her voice, the way she looked at me, and the subtle shift that turned my routine upside down. My name's Alex. I'm not the kind of person who looks for trouble or drama or anything out of the ordinary. I like my peace, my quiet routines. I work in software development, I read fantasy novels, I go on occasional runs when I'm feeling guilty about sitting too long. That's my life. Predictable. Calm. The neighborhood I live in fits me perfectly. Neat rows of houses, trimmed hedges, morning hellos that never dig deeper than surface politeness. It's the kind of place where everyone smiles but no one really talks. And I was completely fine with that. Until the day she said those 6 words. You always pick the right time. They didn't sound like much. Harmless, even sweet. But the way she looked at me, it was as if there was something beneath the words, something unspoken but deliberate. That's when I knew I had stepped into something far more delicate than I was prepared for. Her name was Mrs. Callahan, my neighbor. At least 25 years older than me, kind and gentle, the type of woman who brought cookies to new neighbors and waved from the porch while tending her roses. We'd always exchanged pleasantries. Nothing more, nothing less. Until that day. That single phrase, simple, casual, but weighted, changed the entire atmosphere between us. Suddenly, I couldn't ignore how often she was around when I stepped outside, how her smile lingered, how her eyes seemed to say more than her mouth ever did. I told myself I was imagining it. I wasn't. Looking back, that moment at the trash bin was the beginning of what I wasn't sure yet, but I could feel something shift. The routine that had always kept me grounded was now haunted by glances, silences, and a quiet tension I couldn't explain away, the kind of tension that demands resolution or consequences. What do you do when someone starts seeing you as something more, but you can't give them what they're hoping for? What happens when kindness is mistaken for connection? And how do you tell someone that you care but not in the way they want? I didn't have the answers. All I had was the sound of a trash lid closing, her voice echoing in my ears, and a storm quietly building behind the picket fences of suburban peace. This is how it all began. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just a friendly comment. Mrs. Callahan had always been polite. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe I had just caught a strange tone in her voice because I'd been tired that day or distracted. But the more I tried to dismiss it, the more present it became in my mind. The look in her eyes when she said it. The way she stood just a little too close. The hesitation, like she was testing a boundary she didn't want to admit existed. The next morning I saw her again. I was grabbing my mail, and there she was watering her hydrangeas at the edge of her front yard. We made eye contact. She smiled. I waved. It should have been like any other day, but I noticed her eyes lingered a beat too long. I felt it like a pulse between us, a kind of awkward awareness. She didn't say anything that time, but she didn't need to. The following days played out like some quiet psychological game. Every time I stepped outside, I'd find her out there too. Always coincidentally, always with a reason. Watering plants, clipping roses, sweeping the porch, never speaking first, but always ready to. I started adjusting my schedule. I'd wait longer before taking the trash out. I'd step out early in the morning for a walk instead of in the evening. I didn't want to be rude, but something had shifted between us and I didn't know how to manage it. I wasn't used to this. I wasn't used to someone watching me like that. Not with lust, necessarily, but with hope. Hope is scarier. Then came the light bulb incident. It was a Thursday evening. I'd just gotten home from work when I heard a knock on my door. I opened it and found Mrs. Callahan standing there, holding a small lamp in her hands. "Hi, Alex," she said. "Sorry to bother you, but I can't seem to get this bulb to work. I think I'm doing something wrong. It was such a small thing, nothing inappropriate." But when I took the lamp from her, she didn't let go immediately. Her fingers brushed mine. She held my gaze just a second too long. "Thanks," she said softly. I fixed the bulb. She stayed while I did. And when I handed the lamp back, she smiled in a way I couldn't ignore. "I always feel safer knowing you're next door." That night, I couldn't sleep. Was I imagining this? Or was something happening that I didn't want to acknowledge? I didn't want to accuse her of anything. She hadn't done anything wrong, but I couldn't shake the growing sense that I was slowly being pulled into something I wasn't equipped to handle. A week later, she asked me to come over for coffee. I hesitated. I knew what that could mean, or at least what it could be building toward. But I told myself again maybe I was overthinking. Maybe she was just lonely. So I agreed. 1 cup of coffee. Harmless. Her house smelled like cinnamon and old books. Her furniture was floral and worn, but everything felt intentional. She had candles lit, soft music playing. It wasn't inappropriate, but it was prepared. She made me coffee and sat across from me, legs tucked neatly beneath her, her voice low and deliberate. We talked. Small things. Then came a pause. "You're different," she said. I blinked. "Different how?" She smiled and looked down at her mug. "Just not like most people. You actually listen. You don't treat me like I'm invisible." I nodded awkwardly. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to invalidate her, but I also didn't want to feed into something that could mislead her. "I appreciate that," she added, "more than you know." I left shortly after that. Not abruptly, not rudely, but I made an excuse. I had some emails to answer, which was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. The real reason I left was because my heart was pounding the entire time, not from excitement, but from guilt. She hadn't crossed any lines, but I knew she wanted to, or at least she was hoping something might happen, and I didn't know how to handle that. Over the following days, she kept finding excuses to ask for help. Her garden hose was leaking, the latch on her back gate was stuck, her bathroom cabinet door was loose. And each time I came over, I saw it again, that hopeful softness in her eyes, the way her voice dipped when she thanked me, the way her smile lingered, just a little too long. I couldn't avoid her forever. But I tried. I threw myself into work. I took longer walks through different streets. I stopped sitting on my porch. But even from inside my house, I felt her watching. It was subtle. A shadow behind a curtain. A glance from her driveway. A figure tending her roses as I left for work. And then one evening she was waiting for me on my porch. She didn't knock. She didn't call. She just stood there. "Can we talk?" she asked. I couldn't say no. We sat in my living room. She looked nervous. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. "I'm sorry if I've made you uncomfortable," she said. "That was never my intention. I've been alone a long time, Alex. And when you moved in, when you started being kind, something in me just woke up." She didn't cry. She didn't touch me. She just spoke. And it broke my heart. Because everything she was saying was so honest, so painfully human. She wasn't trying to seduce me. She wasn't playing games. She was just lonely, achingly, invisibly lonely. And I had become the symbol of what she was missing. I didn't want to hurt her, but I had to be honest. "Mrs. Callahan, I said I care about you, but I can't be what you're looking for. I respect you so much, but I don't feel the same way." She nodded slowly. "I know. I think I always knew, but I just needed to say it out loud." I walked her back to her porch that night. She didn't look back. Neither did I. But something in me cracked. And I knew this wasn't over yet. The next few days were quiet, eerily quiet. I didn't see Mrs. Callahan in her garden. Her curtains remained drawn. There was no soft wave from across the yard. Just silence. For the first time since this began, I missed her presence. Not because I wanted anything more, but because her absence felt unnatural. I had grown used to the rhythm of our interaction, the unsaid words, the brief glances, the carefully balanced boundary. And now it was like the air between our homes had stilled. I told myself I had done the right thing. I had been respectful, honest, clear. But being honest doesn't always feel good, and it doesn't always solve everything. I kept wondering if I had broken something fragile and deeply buried. Her loneliness had found a place to bloom, and I had unknowingly watered it. Then I pulled back. Of course it would wither, and maybe part of her would too. One afternoon I came home to find a note taped to my door. It was in her handwriting. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me. I'll be okay. R." I stared at it for a long time before pulling it down. I didn't respond. I didn't know how. Days passed, then weeks. Eventually, I saw her again, not close up, just across the street trimming her hedges. She didn't wave. She didn't look up. She just kept working. And that's when it began, the awkward, polite phase. When we'd see each other at the mailbox or pulling out of the driveway, we'd nod, maybe a small smile, but it wasn't like before. The warmth was gone. In its place was a kind of performative neutrality. We were pretending now, pretending we were never anything more than neighbors, and maybe that was for the best. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left unresolved. It wasn't long before our interactions began to fade entirely. I wasn't sure if she was avoiding me or if I was avoiding her. Maybe both. It didn't feel like avoidance, though. It felt like mourning the possibility of a connection that never became what either of us wanted. Then one night I saw her sitting alone on her porch. It was late. The lights were off except for the dim amber glow from her lamp. She was just sitting there looking out at the street. And suddenly she looked so small, so quiet, so distant. I stood at my window watching her for a moment, unsure if I should go out, unsure if I had any right to. And then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I stepped outside. I didn't say anything. I just took the trash to the curb like I had that first night when all this started. She didn't move, but when I turned to go back inside, her head tilted slightly in my direction. "You always pick the right time," she said. It was quiet, barely above a whisper. I froze. Part of me wanted to go to her, to talk, to explain myself again, but I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I gave a soft smile and walked back inside, letting the screen door creak closed behind me. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I got a call from my mom, just checking in, asking how things were going. I lied and said everything was fine, but she must have heard something in my voice. "You sound tired, Alex. Are you okay?" "I'm okay," I said. "Just a lot on my mind." "You know," she said gently, "some people carry so much pain around they don't even realize they're doing it. Until someone comes along and gives them a reason to feel again." "I didn't mean to give anyone false hope," I said. "I know," she replied. "But sometimes kindness is enough to wake something up in someone, and once it's awake, it's hard to put it back to sleep." That stayed with me. I went for a walk later that evening, just to clear my head. I passed her house and noticed a flicker of light in the living room. The curtain was slightly open, and for a second I saw her sitting there, a book in her lap, her face unreadable. I didn't stop, but I thought about her the entire walk. When I got home, I saw that her garden gate was open, flapping gently in the breeze. It wasn't like her to leave it like that. She was always meticulous. I hesitated. Then I crossed the yard and quietly latched it shut. The next morning, I found a note on my porch. Just one word: thanks. Weeks passed and summer gave way to early autumn. Life began to resume its quiet rhythm. I got busy at work. I started seeing someone, a woman I met at a friend's birthday dinner. Her name was Layla. She was smart, thoughtful, easy to talk to. We weren't serious yet, but it felt good to be around someone who didn't come with emotional weight I couldn't carry. Still, I thought about Mrs. Callahan more often than I admitted, not in a romantic way, not in any kind of inappropriate longing, but in a quiet, unresolved ache. We had come so close to something real, but not all real things are meant to become more. And then, as the leaves began to fall, she surprised me. I was raking my front lawn when I heard her voice. "Need help with that?" I turned. She was standing at the edge of her yard, gloves on, hair pulled back. She looked steady, lighter. "Sure," I said, trying not to sound too surprised. We raked in silence for a while. The sun low in the sky, the air crisp with the change of season. When the last of the leaves were bagged, she looked at me. "I'm sorry," she said, "for how I made you feel." You didn't do anything wrong, I replied. I crossed a line, she said, even if I didn't mean to. I didn't realize how much I had started depending on your presence. It was selfish. No, I said. It was human. We stood there for a moment, both of us holding that truth like something fragile. Do you think we can go back to being neighbors? She asked. Maybe we can start with being friends, I replied. Her smile was small, but it reached her eyes. And just like that, something began to mend. Not romantically, not emotionally tangled, just honestly, respectfully. We started talking again. Short conversations over mailboxes, casual comments over hedges. The weight that once hung between us began to dissolve. Layla came over one day. Mrs. Callahan met her with a kind smile and a firm handshake. Afterward, Layla asked, "Is that the neighbor you mentioned?" I nodded. "She seems nice," she said. "And a little sad." "She's had a hard few years," I said. But I didn't elaborate. Because not everything has to be explained. Some things just live quietly in the spaces between people. And maybe that's enough. As the leaves fell and the days grew shorter, our lives settled into a quieter, more intentional pace. Whatever had existed between me and Mrs. Callahan, the tension, the charge, the unspoken what if, had been quietly folded away. Not erased, not forgotten, but transformed into something quieter, something respectful, something sustainable. She was no longer the lonely widow waiting on her porch with eyes full of what she didn't say, and I was no longer the unassuming neighbor she watched through curtains. We were simply two people who had seen something in one another and then somehow let it go. But the truth is, even when nothing happens, something always lingers. One Saturday morning, I was on my way out to grab coffee when I saw her placing a folding table in her front yard. It caught me off guard. Mrs. Callahan was not one for public displays. I slowed my pace and crossed the street. She looked up. "Neighborhood book swap," she said, smiling. "Thought it might be nice to bring people together." "Fall's a good time for stories, don't you think?" I laughed. "You've always got a clever reason for everything. Only the important things," she replied. The table was modest, a few stacks of paperbacks, some poetry collections, a couple of hardcovers with well-worn spines. But what mattered more was the gesture and opening. A soft return to the world. Neighbors stopped by. People lingered longer than usual. I helped carry out a second box from her foyer. As we placed the books down, I noticed a framed picture tucked on a side shelf, her and her husband younger, laughing the ocean behind them. She caught me looking. That was our 10-year anniversary. Mendocino. He made me try oysters. I hated them. I smiled. "You look really happy in that photo." "I was," she said quietly. "Not every day, not every moment, but in the way that counts." She let the silence settle before she continued. "I've been thinking a lot about that lately. What happiness really means. It's not fireworks. It's not even being seen. It's choosing to see yourself and still finding something good there." I nodded, unsure what to say. So I just stood beside her, letting the moment breathe. Later that day, Layla joined me at the book table. She and Mrs. Callahan struck up a surprisingly warm conversation. They talked about gardening, small bookstores, and the best teas for cold mornings. Watching them, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. It was as if whatever part of Mrs. Callahan once held a quiet ache for connection had found its resting place in acceptance, and whatever curiosity I once had was now a kind of admiration. Later that evening, Layla and I sat on my porch sipping wine. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "She's an interesting woman," Layla said. "She is. She likes you," she added, teasing. "She liked being seen," I replied. "There's a difference." Layla was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You see me too." I turned to her and said, "I know." It was the first time I realized I had changed. That this whole journey, what began as a late-night trash run and turned into a quiet, emotional entanglement, had led me back to something clearer. Not dramatic love, not forbidden affection, but presence, intention, truth. And then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Callahan began hosting a monthly gathering, nothing extravagant, Just an open invitation to neighbors' tea-light music conversation. She called them porch evenings. At first, only a few people showed up, but slowly it grew. Elderly couples, young families, new neighbors, old friends. Her front porch became a symbol of soft connection. She had found her rhythm again. A purpose. One evening, I brought my guitar. Layla encouraged me. "Play that old Otis Redding song," she whispered. I did. And as the melody floated into the crisp autumn air, I saw Mrs. Callahan close her eyes, gently swaying. After the music ended, she came up and placed a small hand on my shoulder. "You know," she said, "sometimes we mistake loneliness for desire. And sometimes we mistake desire for a deeper kind of longing." "I understand now," I said. She nodded. "And I forgive myself for not understanding sooner." That sentence hit me harder than I expected, because in her forgiveness I heard my own. She didn't need saving. She never did. She just needed someone to look her way long enough to remind her she was still here, and I needed someone to remind me that empathy doesn't always require action. That being present is sometimes enough. That winter, things changed again. Mrs. Callahan slipped on ice in her driveway. A fractured wrist. I helped with errands, picked up prescriptions, even shoveled her walk. She never asked. I never made a show of it. It was just what you do for someone who once reminded you of who you are. One snowy afternoon, as I brought her groceries in, she said something I'll never forget. "You saved me from disappearing." I paused, unsure how to receive that. "You were always here," I said. "You just needed someone to reflect you back." Her eyes welled. "Then thank you for the mirror." Time passed. Spring returned. Her wrist healed. The porch evenings resumed. Layla and I grew closer. We moved in together the following summer. She brought more plants than furniture, and I didn't mind. Our life was easy, not without struggle, but rooted in honesty. Mrs. Callahan eventually moved too, not far, just to a quieter part of town near her sister. Before she left, she invited me over for one last cup of tea. "I think it's time for a new chapter," she said. "You deserve a good one." She handed me a small envelope. "Don't open this until I'm gone." I respected her wish. The day after her moving truck pulled away, I opened the note. It read, "Dear Alex, we don't always get to choose when someone changes our lives, but we do get to choose what we do with that change. You reminded me that I'm still a woman with a story, not just a shadow of one. I hope you keep seeing people, not with your eyes, but with your heart. With deep gratitude, R." I folded the letter and placed it in a small box where I keep the things that matter most. Ticket stubs, photos, my father's old watch, and now, this. Sometimes love doesn't take the shape we expect. Sometimes it's not even love as we define it. Sometimes it's a mirror held up by a stranger or a neighbor who simply says, "You're still here. You still matter." That kind of connection, it doesn't fade. It reshapes you, and you carry it forward. It's strange how the smallest, most ordinary moments can unravel something deep inside us. I didn't set out looking for anything that night when I took out the trash. I wasn't lost. I wasn't broken. I was just drifting, focused on routines, on being dependable, on making it through the day. Until someone across the street, someone I barely knew, looked up and saw me. And I saw her too. Not in a romantic storybook way, but in that raw, human way that says, "I recognize your loneliness because I've felt it too." Mrs. Callahan never crossed any lines, neither did I. But what happened between us was real. It was subtle, wordless at times, but powerful, like wind that reshapes the shore without needing to scream. She reminded me that connection doesn't always begin with love. Sometimes it begins with being noticed, with one conversation that lingers, with one pair of eyes that sees through the layers you've been hiding behind for years. And in that noticing, I remembered the man I used to be before I let routine turn into resignation. Mrs. Callahan is gone now, just a few miles away, living closer to her family, but she left more than an empty house. She left an imprint, a reminder that sometimes we all need a witness, someone who reflects back who we are when we forget. And maybe that's what love looks like in its quietest form. Not possession, not passion, just presence, just truth, just kindness without expectation. Now I try to live with my eyes more open. I sit with Layla on the porch more often. We talk about real things. We check in, not out. And every so often I still pass that guest room window across the street and think about how much we all carry and how rarely we let it be seen. So if you're watching this, let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly saw someone and let yourself be seen, not through filtered photos or polished small talk, but honestly, quietly, bravely? That's what this story is really about. It's not about infidelity. It's not about temptation. It's about how easy it is to drift away from ourselves and how one moment, one conversation, one unexpected person can gently bring us back. So take a moment today. Pause. Look up. Pay attention. And if this story moved something inside you, if it made you think about someone in your life you've been ignoring or a part of yourself you've been neglecting, don't let that moment pass. Hit that like button if you believe in quiet, powerful stories like this. Leave a comment. Tell us about a moment that changed you in an unexpected way. And subscribe to the channel so you never miss these stories that help us reflect, reconnect, and remember what truly matters. Because the smallest moments, they're often the ones that shape us the most.